Hello and welcome again to the Writer Review. This is Eric Carrot Writer, and this week we're going way back in time. We're going back to the year 1969 because this week we're going to be doing a review based off of the action spy film espionage movie titled On Her Majesty's Secret Service. This is the sixth movie that was a part of the James Bond franchise. And I think it was also the last one that was under the production studio Eon Productions. And this was actually also the very first James Bond movie that did not feature Sean Connery. Sean Connery retired from his position after You Only Live Twice, and was eventually replaced by George Lazenby. But then, after George Lazenby was only in this one outing as James Bond, eventually Sean Connery came back for another James Bond movie following that in 1971 with Diamonds Are Forever. And then we thought that would have been the end of Sean Connery before, they moved on to Roger Moore. But then Sean Connery came back for another James Bond movie, only this time it was not part of the series. It was, not to say that it wasn't canonized, no, but it was not part of the James Bond franchise type movies that the 26 of them. He did one that was called Never Say Never Again, which is basically just a reboot or a remake of Thunderball, which came out in 1983. So Sean Connery did return as James Bond for two more movies, one in the early 70s and one in the early 80s. Now, there was a reason why Sean Connery did not continue his role as James Bond, and that was because, I guess after 5 James Bond movies, he just kind of simply had enough. He wanted to move forward. He wanted to do other projects non-Bond related. It was becoming tiring of him pretty much eating, sleeping, breathing, and repeating James Bond. I mean, I guess it was okay for the first 2-3 movies, like Dr. No, From Russia with Love, Goldfinger. But then by the time you get to Thunderball and You Only Live Twice, he pretty much kind of had enough. So they eventually get this newbie named George Lazenby. Well, he's not a complete nobody, but I'm not going to say he was a nobody. That's kind of unfair to say that. He was kind of like an unknown, even though the only acting credentials he had prior to James Bond was doing commercials for some chocolate that was sold in Australia. I don't quite remember the brand, but that's probably the only acting credentials that George Lazenby had. I guess he was actually called out to play James Bond on a limb through face value. So this is George Lazenby in his one and only performance as James Bond. And I guess you could say this was I'm not going to say this movie was a disappointment, but at the same time, it was kind of disappointing that Lazenby only did James Bond one time. He replaced Sean Connery, only for Sean Connery to replace him in the next movie. So it was his predecessor was also his successor. Yeah, try to see if we can work our way around what I just said. Anyways, the runtime runs for 2 hours and 22 minutes long. It is directed by Peter Hunt, who was the editor for the first 5 James Bond movies. Now he's being promoted to the director's position. The producers are, of course, Harry Saltzman and Albert Broccoli. The script was written by Richard Maybaum, additional dialogue by Simon Raven. It is, of course, based off of the novel by Sir Ian Fleming. Alright, the score was composed by John Barry, the cinematography by Michael Reed, and it was edited by John Glenn. And the stars of the movie are George Lazenby, Diana Rigg, Telly Savalas, who of course everybody remembers as Kojak. Let's see, we have Bernard Lee as M, of course. Lois Maxwell as Miss Moneypenny. Desmond Llewellyn as Q. We also have Gabriele Ferzetti, Ilse Steppat, George Baker, Bernard Horsfall, Yuri Borienko, and James Bree. So, with the exception of a tiny flaw in the production aspect, I have to say on Her Majesty's Secret Service, the 6th edition of the James Bond series, is definitely one of the best entries, not the best, but at least up there among one of the best entries in this long-running franchise that's still going on to this day. I've never said it was number 1. There have been better Bonds out there, but it's still like up there among them. The action scenes will very much have you glued to your seats with excitement and unpredictability. The love scenes were more earned than rewarded, and unfortunately, though, it also has a bit of sadness in the end, which is rare for a Bond film. You know, most Bond films often unfold with him getting the girl and driving off into the sunset. Here, we actually have one that actually results in an unhappy ending for our protagonist, head assassin of the MI6 headquarters. And even having Bond embody a bit of emotion, like grieving after his wife's passing, and Bond almost coming close to resigning for His Majesty's Secret Service. So we're definitely seeing James Bond in a different way. Instead of seeing almost like a caricatured, emotionless, icy cold assassin, we actually see a very flawed version of James Bond. A guy who actually has emotions. A guy who actually can personify the same kind of feelings as everyone else. Vulnerability, fear, sadness, while still kind of remaining, suave, handsome, sophisticated, and very resourceful in taking down bad guys, and also remaining fresh in the tongue-in-cheek humor that has often been a bit of a trademark for our cold but charming assassin 007 James Bond. The biggest flaw, as the casting of Bond himself, which felt like it was cast at the last minute as Sean Connery's successor, was the obviously inexperienced George Lazenby taking over, and proves that he is not in the same category as Sean Connery. But I guess we kind of knew that from the beginning, because George Lazenby just did not have that same level of experience that Sean Connery embodied. Lazenby, he tried. He had the looks, he had the sophistications, and maybe he might probably had some physical similarities to Sean Connery. But I think the thing was that, unlike the other successor to Sean Connery, Roger Moore. Lazenby just wanted to try to do everything, try to copy the image of Sean Connery, and maybe one of his biggest weaknesses was that he tried too hard, and that could also be a liability and a hindrance on his behalf. Though I will forgive that it was actually George Lazenby's acting debut, aside from doing commercials prior to being cast as Bond. His acting actually comes off rather dull and lacking in the wit or the charisma as Connery. But that's partially because he tried too hard, but eventually came off flat and awkward. The intro to Lazenby's character was quite appealing, as his visage was concealed at first. I mean, the opening scenes, he's driving, I'm not sure if it was his signature Aston Martin, down a mountainside, and some lady, and he was following some lady who eventually parked her car, and it looked like she was ready to commit suicide by drowning. And then Bond, just saved her life. Of course, he was being attacked by a couple of goons. And he practically saved this young lady's life, without really actually knowing that the young lady he saved was a countess named Teresa something, but she would of course rather be called Tracy. Her name was Tracy Draco, who is her father is of course a head of some top international mafia organization. And I guess she just was kind of like tired of having guards protect her all the time. She's kind of like, this free-spirited individual who just doesn't want to be like tied down to her father's protection and have all these goons by her side. She doesn't want any of that. She's tired of it, and I guess the only way she can escape this lifestyle of hers was to just commit suicide. But however, Bond practically saved her, even though much to her chagrin. So then she just takes off. And then George Lazenby's James Bond said something like, "This never happened to the other fellow." And then it goes on with the opening credits, which was performed by Louis Armstrong. Probably the last song that he composed before his death in 1971 from kidney failure. Yeah, I've always liked I always liked Louis Armstrong. He always had this great voice. All this gravelly, and I sing to myself, what a wonderful world. Yeah, he had that kind of voice when he spoke. Yeah, that's kind of like how Louis Armstrong sang. Anyways, this was kind of like the last song that he actually composed, for this movie. And sadly he passed away in 1971 after being an accomplished musician and singer, dating back to the big band era in the 30s and 40s. So, this guy has longevity. The back of his head is featured. Then we feature the James Bond theme starts playing, and then when the beach fight commences, that's where Lazenby's face materializes, and the movie takes off from there. The oblique one-liner from Lazenby's Bond was priceless. This never happens to the other fellow. What makes Lazenby stand out is that, unlike the other Bonds, he actually can fight the physical battles and is not fully dependent on high-tech technological enforcements to help him prevail over what danger is coming after him. Of course, the overuse of technological apparatuses was like mostly during the Roger Moore era, was when Q's invention started to come more into effect. But in On Her Majesty's Secret Service, a lot of the fight scenes were basically a lot of physicality, because let's face it, he did have, even though he never really exposed his physique, Lazenby actually did have a physique. He was actually a male model before he started shooting commercials in Australia, and also before James Bond. And he also has the distinction of being the one and only non-European born James Bond, being that he was from Australia. The others were from either Britain. Well, Pierce Brosnan, of course, we know he's from Ireland. But yeah, George Lazenby is the one and only Australian-born actor to play James Bond. And yes, there were a lot of the fight scenes were mostly, a lot of kicking, punching, and using, using more of his head to overcome his adversaries, rather than just depending on Q's gadgets and unorthodox apparatuses to overcome his adversaries. But the worst part, it seems to be like Lazenby tries too hard to be like Connery in his outings, but in the end, it kind of failed pretty badly. What Roger Moore succeeded that Lazenby failed was that Moore was going to play Bond to a newer approach instead of being a Connery 2.0. And we see that in the Roger Moore era of James Bond, where he wants to sort of like make it something of his own, instead of I'll just emulate and try to duplicate the moves that Connery did in the first 5 movies. Even though Lazenby's acting is rather green, there is still much to love about On Her Majesty's Secret Service. I'm not saying his acting was bad, but it was not like Connery level. For one, it shows that even the greatest womanizer can still find genuine true love, and here Bond actually falls in love with a Bond woman and even marries her. Sure, it was a bit of a struggle, and sure, he did this on account of her father's request. But he actually did show true affection towards this Bond woman, and wasn't just used as a trophy prize in the end. This shows that he does care about his feelings towards women, and are not always the flavor of the week. In other words, like, it seems like every time he has, it's like every James Bond movie, there's always a Bond girl. Well, I don't like to use the word girl, more like a Bond woman. He always has a new one. Every time. Sometimes you often wonder where their whereabouts are. And in the end, they're often treated sort of almost like trophy prizes. Hey, I solved. Hey, I cracked another case. I conquered evil. Now I'm about to take advantage of my prize while I go into a place of concealment and show them my prize trophy located in the bottom reaches of my trousers. Well, we don't really get that in the end. In the end, he actually does go on and marry a Bond girl, but in the end, karma came back and struck him in the ass. The Bond girl is a troubled daughter of a high-ranking European crime syndicate, and her name is Tracy Draco, played by Diana Rigg. Now, in case people don't know who Diana Rigg was, she was actually in the British series The Avengers back in the early 60s. And this was actually, she was a great addition to the Bond franchise, being that she was a little bit different from all the other Bond girls, which I'll be more than happy to explain as we go along. This comes after he saved her while paying off a frank debt her father Draco, played by Gabriele Ferzetti, feels welcomed for Bond in becoming a son-in-law. Now, basically, Bond really didn't want to marry her. He was, like, for the past couple of years, had been obsessed with looking for Blofeld. You know, after the movie You Only Live Twice, he was obsessed with trying to find Blofeld. I mean, of course, back at MI6, M, played by Bernard Lee, said that you've had a long time looking for Blofeld, but you came out with a wild goose egg. You found absolutely nothing. So therefore, I'm going to assign you to another mission. But then Bond, being kind of almost a bit like a whiny bitch, ends up saying, well, if you don't want me to go look for Blofeld, then you leave me with no choice. I will resign from MI6. So then he tells Moneypenny about his resignation. He asks M to sign, and his request was granted. But actually, the reality was that Moneypenny, who's also seems to be a little bit crafty, aside from also being somewhat seductive towards Bond, well, she kind of knew that Bond really wasn't going to retire from MI6. And then in the end, the only thing that M signed was for him to have a 2-week vacation with pay. But of course we know that Bond is a guy who never sleeps unless it's with a hot chick. So then he also, like at the end of the movie, he marries Tracy while rejecting his £1 million offer. And they make their privacy for a little rest and relaxation. Now, the romantic angle between Bond and Tracy definitely plays a prominent role in the first 45 minutes of the movie and the dying minutes of the movie. Though the franchise is pretty much met with action and suspense, the loving chemistry between Bond and Tracy takes us to a more realistic viewpoint to the Bond character, being that The kind of girls he loves are not the damsels in distress he rescues, but is almost at an equal to him, and he could genuinely connect with. That's kind of like where Tracy Draco differs from the other Bond girls, like Honey Ryder, no relation, even though her last name was spelled Ryder. But just to make that clear, no relation. I do not have an aunt named Honey. Or do I? I'll have to ask. No, I won't. I'm just kidding. And there was also one named Honor Blackman from another Bond movie. So, yeah. What makes her stand out was that, like Bond, she herself can challenge the world and showcase her bravery towards danger. She's just as much of a thrill seeker as James Bond. And she also gets in on a few fight scenes as well, including beating a big heavy set guy like Gunther, who was like a big heavy set assassin. And she uses her wits and her smarts to overcome this gargantuan adversary. Now, even though the fight scene seemed a bit off and a little bit awkward, I mean, basically what she did was she used her wits and her resourcefulness. And, of course, Gunther got a bit sloppy. I guess he didn't see the wall with the bed of nails hanging there. So his back lands on the bed of nails. She gives him a little kick. Falls down the stairs. He's dead. But yeah, she also tends to be, a person who seems to get herself involved in dangerous situations. I know a lot of the other Bond girls actually do. But then again, a lot of them are actually also spies or secret or even have some form of experience in espionage as well. Tracy does not have that kind of credibility to her credit. Not that I'm discounting her or dismissing her in any kind of way. And some people might think that's also not very organic. They just wanted to see a hot, gorgeous, small, petite-sized chick taking down a big 250-pound ogre. Because everybody will obviously root for the hot chick over the oversized barbarian. In a film that counteracts the formula to the Bond series, the Bond girl actually usurps Bond himself. Sometimes I think some of her stunts and some of her moves are actually better than Bond's. I mean, I'm not discounting Bond either by saying that his arsenal is not up to par like Sean Connery's, but still no. Tracy Draco has a lot of interesting, fun scenes that you can invest yourself into. There are 3 pivotal scenes that truly captivates a more humane side to the Bond character in this movie. The scene where he wipes the tears of Tracy on her birthday when he asked her for her hand in marriage, and the tragic scene that will leave even the non-Bond fans to tears. Because we're just witnessing a man whose wife had been shot right in front of him. Maybe the bullet was meant for Bond, but instead it struck her. And you definitely feel a lot more emotion to this Bond movie than compared to the other ones from the Sean Connery era, to the Roger Moore, not sure about the Timothy Dalton ones. because the Timothy Dalton Bond had really no humorous quips. Pierce Brosnan, he had, of course, his share of moments. And Daniel Craig. For action lovers, of course, there's a plethora of them. The main villain, Ernest Stavro Blofeld, played by Telly Savalas, replacing Donald Pleasance, returns as he threatens the world with biological warfare. No, it's not necessarily. No, don't worry, it wasn't him who did COVID-19. But he had some kind of other kind of biological warfare that might even be worse than COVID-19. Maybe even worse than the Spanish flu. I know I'm going off the topic here, but you know that the Spanish flu was worse than COVID-19. While COVID-19 took the lives of almost 4 million people in the world, the Spanish flu took the lives of 500 million in a span of 3 years. That's a lot. Anyhow, his form of biological warfare involved a private clinic located on the hilltop of the Swiss Alps. By the way, I gotta say this, the cinematography is really, really stunning here. Okay, there's a private clinic up on some mountainside in the Swiss Alps. And Blofeld is also accompanied by 12 gorgeous women from all over the world. Of course, you know how Bond and gorgeous women come together like ships and boats, fish and chips, peanut butter and jelly. Well, guess what? Yes, these are attractive, beautiful women who have food allergies. Now, their mission is to go to whatever parts of the world and contaminate with their food allergies. They were mesmerized by Blofeld to contaminate these food allergies to make the foods non-fertile, which means that if you're allergic to corn, for example, they're gonna infect the corn stalk so that corn will not be able to grow. Same could be said for the other food groups. Like if you're allergic to chickens, you won't be having any more chicken dinners anymore. If you're allergic to broccoli, you won't be able to eat any more broccoli, which is probably not a bad thing because I fucking hate broccoli. But nonetheless, of course, this is like even worse than a disease where you have to wash your hands 30 times, put a mask on, and stay the fuck away from people. 6 feet apart. Just the science. Well, guess what? Newsflash for you. If these ladies come anywhere near the allergies that they're susceptible to, that infects them, well, guess what? It's going to cause famine. We're going to go without food. And guess what? We're all going to die, baby. It's going to be the end of humanity. Finito. Sayonara. That's all, folks. Goodbye, humanity. Hallelujah. We're finished. We're dead. See ya. Win what be ya. Oh, just to let you know something. The reason why I'm acting this way is because this is a contribution to my mental illness. So if you see me doing these kind of weird quirks, let me just advise you, I have Asperger's syndrome. That's why I do these things. So anyways, that's what Blofeld's intentions are. To wipe humanity off the earth. By using these ladies to contaminate these food allergies they're suffering from so that it can contain famine. We'll starve. We'll die.
Be careful.
And goodbye.
Eric, be careful. We can get into trouble. Come on. I don't want to lose my internet for you. Stop that now.
Taking
Settle
the false name of
Settle down.
taking under the false name of Count de Beauchamp, Blofeld goes incognito as a genealogist.
They're gonna cut me off.
No, they're not.
Yeah, don't keep doing that.
Bond
I
finds.
thought you were doing a review, not
That's
this.
what I'm doing.
Do a review, not this.
Bond finds his esoteric hideout. Even though they faced each other before in the previous film, You Only Live Twice, which I actually find kind of weird because how did Blofeld not know who Bond was in this movie? When yet they actually saw each other in You Only Live Twice, so I don't know where that came from. It felt a bit odd seeing Blofeld forgetting about what Bond looked like. So we have Bond posing as Sir Hilary Bree, who is supposed to be some kind of specialist in something, I forget. Bond makes an awkward slip, and now Blofeld is after him in a heart-pounding chase scenes, which includes the use of skis and toboggans, and I think there's even what am I saying? Yes, there's going to be a exciting bobsled chase. Blofeld is not alone, as he has a fellow assistant named Irma Bunt, played by Ilse Steppat, by his side. Now, unlike You Only Live Twice, Blofeld is not really in on the action scenes. In fact, his appearances seem to be somewhat sporadic. He has the cat, and he's got that scar around his right eye, I think. He's bald. Well, then again, that makes perfect sense because Telly Savalas was organically a bald-headed guy. Donald Pleasance was a bald guy, but anyhow, enough of that. They tend to. Yeah. In You Only Live Twice, he's only just appears in a few scenes, but is not really too much involved in the action scenes. Here, Blofeld is given a lot to do. And he also gets kind of in on the action as well. And of course, one of the great things about Bond movies is that Bond tends to be somewhat athletic. He just seems like he's just a jack of all trades. The ski scenes are just some of the most exciting parts. Except that I really, really, really almost lost my stomach where, a bunch of goons were chasing after Bond. And then all of a sudden there was this snowplow, this giant snowplow that was in the background. Bond, of course, jumps over the snowplow. Some of the other goons also jump over the snowplow. But then there was this poor unfortunate sucker who got sucked into the snowplow, and he got killed to shreds. And all Bond could say was, that guy had a lot of guts. Yeah. Hey, evil villain or non-evil villain, I don't condone that, okay? That's sick. Seeing things like that made me sick to my stomach. I mean, I felt like puking my fucking guts out. Ugh. Okay, yes. Bad guys deserve their comeuppance, but that's extreme. The action scenes provide some of the most well choreographed scenarios in the Bond franchise, and the epic struggle between good and evil, life and death, will truly leave its audience astounded. So, under the direction of Peter Hunt in his directing debut after editing the first 5 Bond movies, we see that Hunt has mastered the action scenes with caution and the right amount of formula that was used in the Bond series during the Sean Connery era. I would also like to say that the score was composed by frequent composer for the James Bond movie, John Barry. In the 11 Bond films he composed, On Her Majesty's Secret Service still stands out among one of his best works. Even with the omittance of lyrics in the opening scenes, the soundtrack was majestic. The daunting ballad, We Have All the Time in the World, by Louis Armstrong, is the perfect song for the growing attraction with Bond and Tracy. And the James Bond theme is still the pleasure to the ears. That so, you know, the technological features, like I said, was spot on. People would say, oh, this is the worst Bond movie because George Lazenby was an inexperienced person who was picked after the 11th hour. But no, I mean, sure, they could have picked another actor to play Bond. No, I think they actually did the right decision. To have Lazenby play James Bond. I just didn't really... He was just not at the same level as Sean Connery. So sure, after On Her Majesty's Secret Service, George Lazenby stepped away, and his predecessor, like I said, became his successor as Connery returned for another go-around with Diamonds Are Forever. It's a wonderment what this film would have been like if Connery acted here instead of his successor. But then you also may want to ask yourself, what would the Bond franchise be like if Lazenby did 3 more Bond movies? That's another question that I also ask. I mean, sometimes even still to this day, Lazenby often regretted stepping down from James Bond because, you know, in his own cockiness and his arrogance, you know, he said something along the lines like, Bond is never going to continue. This is the end of Bond. Because it's not going to survive after this. So, aside from his arrogance, he was also quite cynical, thinking that Bond is pretty much a dead franchise after On Her Majesty's Secret Service. But then we realized that that wasn't the case. I mean, even after 59 years, there are still Bond movies being made. This year alone, probably by I think around November, Daniel Craig is going to be doing his last James Bond movie called No Time to Die. We'll see how that turns out. If this is going to be a good final farewell for Daniel Craig. And we'll wonder if even the Bond franchise will continue even after Daniel Craig steps down. Who will be the next replacement? There's a lot of who's and what's. But in the end, nobody knows. You know, in the 70s and 80s, we had the Roger Moore era. And then we had the late 80s with Timothy Dalton, and the 90s and early 2000s we had Pierce Brosnan. And then since 2006 till this year, we have Daniel Craig. Mm-hmm. And each of them all brought something new and different to the table. They brought something new and different to the Bond characters. The thing is, where Lazenby lacked was he just wanted to be Sean Connery and didn't bring anything new or fresh to the table, except that we had a more human side to it. This movie, I'm not going to say is perfect. It had its flaws, and it was mainly because of Lazenby's lack of charisma and charm. But he still brought something fresh, being that we made Bond into something a little more human, something a little more organically natural about a James Bond character.
This is going on too long.
Quiet. However, it's still great that this experimental type film shows that there would still be hope long after Connery stepped down, and to this day, many actors followed to get a different side of the Bond character. And even though Lazenby is no Sean Connery or Roger Moore, the movie takes Bond to another direction never explored before, while still proving a myriad of entertainment and excitement the way Bond delivers. Would I recommend this movie? I would. I didn't think it was the worst. I don't think it was the best. I mean, in the Bond franchise, we had its share of hits and misses. This one was a hit. So, with all that said and done, if I was to give this movie a score out of 10, I would give On Her Majesty's Secret Service a 7. This is a great addition to the James Bond franchise, and I highly recommend it. So I guess this ends my writer review. Thank you all for listening in. If you wish to subscribe to my YouTube channel, please feel free to do so. If you wish to leave a comment, go right ahead. I know I had a lot to say in this, but then again, this is James Bond, so you have a lot to say. So all that said and done, thank you all for listening in. If you wish to subscribe to my channel, please feel free to do so. If you wish to leave a comment, go right ahead. Just remember the 3 simple rules. Be kind, be courteous, and please refrain from any rude comments. And I will be back again with another movie review. So until next time, this is Eric Cartwright saying, keep watching those movies, and I'll see you around. Goodbye.